welcome everybody. Before we get started with your presentation, Justin, I'm just going to go through the protocol, so what we're going to do as a collective panel and what you're going to do for your presentation. Okay, so the first couple minutes of Justin's senior project is just me going over our procedure, what materials are in front of you. So if you look at the panel, if you look at the materials in front of you, you should have this sheet that goes over what we do, our protocol. Under that is another sheet that has a couple of big boxes on it. This is a warm and cool feedback sheet. At the top there's warm feedback, so things that Justin does well in his presentation. And on the bottom there's cool feedback, areas where he could work to improve for future presentations. And you can use the back to write down questions if you need to for our question period. The final piece that we have in our small file in front of you is the rubric that we're going to go through and score Justin's presentation on during and after his presentation. We'll talk about it during a deliberation period, how we think he scored according to this rubric. And Justin is going for distinguished today, correct?
Yep.
Yep. All right. So the way that this will work is that when we're done here, when I'm done explaining, Justin will present a slideshow and other visual displays that he's prepared for us. After his presentation, there'll be a 10-minute question and answer period where we can ask clarifying questions of you, Justin. And Justin, would you be okay with us opening it up beyond just our panel?
Yes.
For all audience members? Okay, great. So if we have time, everyone can ask a question. Once the Q&A is done, we'll ask you to leave the room, Justin, and audience members, and go just stand in the pod for a little bit or sit in the pod for a bit as we deliberate over your performance and assess you on the rubric. Once our deliberation period is over, we'll ask you to come back in and we'll share what you got on the project. And Justin has agreed to let us videotape his really excellent presentation. Thank you so much for doing, Justin. Okay. Do we have any questions, panel, before we get started? Do you have any questions, Justin?
I don't believe so.
All right. Okay. Whenever you are ready, you can go ahead and get started, and I will start your timer.
So, welcome everyone to my senior project on the drone revolution. So let me introduce my panel members first. We have Ms. Barker, who is my senior project advisor, Ms. Warner, who taught me junior chemistry, Ms. Stoll, who is my track and cross-country coach, and Emily McDougall, who is my peer. My expert that guided me throughout this research is Thomas Grebouski, who is a certified drone operator, and though we do share the same last name, with him carrying a Part 107 commercial license, he fits the bill for an expert, and on top of that, himself is a drone photographer and does regular photography as well. And on top of that, he is also very, very educated in the drone field. For instance, I could ask him questions about any research that I have, and he could ask me questions, and we're going back and forth, not knowing things and then learning things. So it became a very, very useful tool to have him there. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Is anyone motion sick here? That is great, because there will be a video, and there are lots and lots of animations. So let's start with my inspiration. Oh boy, where to begin? So when I was 6 years old, I saw this in like a Brookstone catalog, and I thought it was just a little dinosaur toy, because I love dinosaurs, when really it was a fully interactive robot that I did not expect when I opened this massive box and it had this in it. I believe that gave way to me signing up for SRTC's intro or engineering applications with robotics, where I really explored engineering applications with robotics. And I've done amazing things in that program, and I've truly found my passion in engineering, which that combines, fits the robotic bill. Aviation, when I was like 14-ish, I had a flight intro in a Robinson 22 helicopter. It was me, the pilot, in the great Manchester area. And he basically just took me around for a flight, and that was it. And I immediately wanted to do it for the rest of my life. That changed. I'm no longer interested in helicopters, but the aviation part I'm still highly interested in. And then all comes together for this bad puppy here. That's a Phantom 3 Professional that my grandparents graciously bestowed upon my brother and I to bond over as a project. That's gone all over, both individually and together. We took it to Puerto Rico on our trip, and we've done a lot of things down there with it, and lots of photos that I couldn't find, sadly, to put on this presentation. And then for my birthday, as you see before you, this Bad Larry. I like this a lot more because it's a racing drone versus a photography drone, and a photography drone is very nitpicky and autonomous and does all this stuff for you. I like this because if I press a button, I know exactly what it's going to do, and I feel like I have more control over it as well, so you can do a lot more things with it, I think. Don't tell Tommy. So my essential question that led my research was, how has and will the drone revolution impact politically, economically, and culturally to society? And my thesis statement that led my essay and thus this presentation was that while laws and police reports highlight the evil potential in companies express a light of possibilities through many areas of society, the drone revolution has impacted humanity all over the world through political, social, and economic factors. Okay, so just a little more housekeeping. A drone, by definition, is a remote-controlled, pilotless aircraft or missile. A quadcopter, on the other hand, like you see before you, is an unmanned helicopter that has 4 rotating rotors. So basically, a quadcopter can be a drone, but a drone cannot be a quadcopter. And I go back and forth between them a lot through this. So this is kind of just an outline of the presentation. I'll talk about military drones and domestic crime, kind of like the bad side of drones, and also transitioning to police drones, and then segueing into a social perspective on police drones and military drones, and then civilian impact, which will be more related to everyone sitting in this room, I think, and then ending with DRL. Oh, I'm ready for that. And then transitioning from the social perspective into the economic view on DRL as a business. And then talk about the commercial use of drones, a company called Skycatch, the FFA and what they have to say about all this stuff going on, and then 2 companies that produce drones such as DJI and AirDroids. So let's start with political. So military drones, they're not new. Ever since World War I and having airplanes with photographers in them taking pictures of the other side, just take the person out of it and have the plane take the pictures and then look at them afterwards. It just takes the middleman out of it. This is not a Predator drone, which most of my military research rotates around. This is a Pioneer that was launched in 1986 on December. And this is significant in the sense where this was the first drone that sent live video back to the operator. Instead of taking pictures and looking at the pictures, and things can change between that time, this was instant, and it was like instant gratification, which made it a whole lot more effective. But this is a Predator drone. And it's usually used for recon, performing data collection, surveying enemy lines, spying, anything that would be needed for something to fly thousands of feet in the air for upwards of 40 hours at a time. That's close to like 2 days of the pilot sitting at his desk and flying the drone. That's crazy. Imagine what you could do in 2 days with this kind of technology. It's also been modified with 2 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. They sound super duper scary, but they're really just a precision strike missile that's operated via laser, which are mounted onto every Predator drone. And the Predator drone is operated by 2 pilots, one operating the general drone flying through the air, and one operating the cameras and vision tracking systems for the missiles. And then there's really an endless range with these drones as well. My research led to me discovering Airman First Class. Wait a minute. I don't want to mess up his name. Airman First Class Brandon Bryant. Basically, his job was to operate the cameras and the targeting systems for the drones that he flew. And he did all that work discussed earlier. But one of the greatest ups that comes with using drones is civilians. And it's a sad part of war, and it happens. But let's say that you are told that this is a convoy of terrorists on their way to the capital city, and you gotta take them out. So you do, but all of a sudden, out of the bushes comes like a bunch of other people. And you didn't know that they were there, and they weren't supposed to be there. And all of a sudden, everything's wrong. And instead of just watching the missile go, you can quickly avert it to an open field where no one is injured and no one gets hurt therefore. And that's seen in the stats too. For instance, in 2008, with a 28% of total civilian casualties, out of all casualties being 28%, and then dropping in 2011 to 16. I say the quotation marks because I don't know, I'm not in the military, I can't confirm that. But to give a comparison, on one mission, it's alleged that the Pakistani army went after alleged evil guys, and as they went through and they did their task, a whopping 46% of the people that they had to take out were civilians. In my world, one civilian is unacceptable, but 46% of all people eliminated, that's crazy numbers. That's a massive waste, and it's just horrible in general. And so that leads into not only people being imperfect, but the drones themselves. As I've learned from Vogue, difficulties could happen for any little reason. A comma could be put in the code by accident, and then the whole thing doesn't work. But more importantly, with technical difficulties in terms of drones, is really communication, both verbal and with the drone. Now, if you imagine if you have a drone bigger than a person carrying 2 Hellfire missiles that you lose control of, that's really, really bad, and that can lead to a lot of bad things. But an example of verbal communication error is that Airman First Class Brandon Bryan was supposed to fly over a convoy and just watch, make sure nothing was sketchy. Something became sketchy, and he was going to radio to the convoy. You know, nice and easy, redirect them. But he couldn't, and he had to watch the convoy become ambushed because they just could not communicate steadily. And one other thing I learned is sight. You can see in the picture, it's a little pixelated because of the projector, but you can't really tell who those people are. You have to trust your intel and trust that those people are the bad guys that the intel says they are. But you really have no clue when you're flying 10,000 feet in the air. So transition to a little more domestic, some of the crimes that could be used. Like, imagine what you could do with this. If you had an evil mind and you have an eye that can fly, with arms, potentially, what could you do? For instance, spying, scouting out houses to later break into, prisoner care packages, where there have been reports of broken drones on the roofs of prisons because the drones are bad and they can't really fly well and they crash into the prison. And you don't know what's being delivered to the prisoners on the inside. It could be weapons, drugs, cell phones, anything. And that's not good to give them. PP Toms, just like back in the good old days. Now it's just even more advanced. Attacking. The propellers have damaged this drone in particular twice now, but they rotate so fast that they could do harmful damage to skin and people as well. And also just, if I duct tape a pair of scissors to it, I could cut anyone's hair in this room. So you can think about the real evil behind this. And a massive issue that the FFA is worried about is drones flying too close to airplanes. Because I have this drone, I want to see how high it can go. I want to see what the ground looks like from however high it can reach. But there's airplanes flying up there. And it's a little different, a drone crashing into an airplane, than just airplane to airplane. It's just a more catastrophic risk to the people in the planes solely. But what if all this is innocent? What if all this is good? What if the spying's just wandering? Someone sees a good photo op, so they decide to take it, but they didn't realize they're trespassing. I got nothing for prison break-ins, that's just bad in general. PP Tom, you don't realize it as you're flying around and people think that you're spying on them, but really you're not. Losing control. The propellers could be damaged, you could lose communication with the drone, and then crashing into planes could have just been an altitude test or another photo op that went wrong. So really, what's the fine line between this evil flying man with arms and just a flying perspective that the drone provides? And that's where a lot of gray ground comes in. But I want to look at this in particular, a peeping Tom. This young chap is, what was his name? Richard Mandeli. He is a British TV presenter. Basically, his story, like he was just chilling in his backyard, in his boxers, getting a nice tan, when this little drone goes buzzing overhead. That's not only annoying, it's an invasion of privacy, especially when he's indecent. So he instinctively is like, I want to go get my 22, I'm going to pop that bad Larry out of the sky. But he gets this whisper of, what if it's private property damage? And he doesn't know if he owns the air above his house. So in the end, he jumps in his car, finds a van parked near his house with a guy scuttling into it, and he goes bang on a window, and the car drives off, and also as well. He then turned himself in, said he didn't mean for anything bad to come of this, and that he didn't realize that he was invading so much on Mr. Mandeli's property. But the real moral from that story is that who's in the wrong here? Let's say that he did shoot down the drone because it's trespassing, right? It's his property. But what about the pilot who maybe he didn't even mean to stay there, he just lost communication for a second and was forced into a hover and was just going to fly by as he intended to do. And then all of a sudden, he just got his, I don't know, $1,000 drone shot out of the sky. Who is really wrong in this instance? And that's even more gray ground with laws and controlling them and also enforcing them. And just to give a kind of idea, these are crime stats in the UK, because that's where my research led. In 2014, there were alleged 283 reported drone incidents of people not liking what the drones are doing. At that time, the Skycatch report was released. I'll talk about that in a little bit. In 2015, it did a 12-fold jump in just 1 year. And then in 2016, we're at 3,456 reported incidents in that 1 year. That's around 10 per day, and that's the same time when the Phantom 4 was released. That's better than Tommy's and my Phantom 3 drone, which my brother now uses for his own photography. So the police are kind of inspired by all this crime, and now they want to do it too. Not quite. Really, the use of a drone by a police department such as the Seattle Police would eliminate the need for a helicopter. A big and bulky, expensive, both in fuel and noise and pilots and time and everything. This would completely eradicate that. It provides everything that a helicopter would: crime scene perspective, pursuit of bad guys, and also target locating, which you couldn't do with a helicopter. And let's say that there's a bad guy lying out in the field somewhere waiting for a cop to stumble in upon him because he's crazy. Would you walk out there willingly? No. You would rather send something else. But this idea for the Seattle Police in using drones was completely shot down before it even began. This council voted against it, and they ended up winning. And they really wanted to enforce regulations upon this so that it wasn't misused, such as needing warrants to use this readily accessible equipment. Any photos taken of non-targets were discarded and deleted, but of course there'd be emergency exceptions. But it was interesting to hear that because none of this is already regulated. You know, the airplanes and the helicopters already use facial recognition software used in cities and license plate scanners for any one of our cars. But so none of this is regulated, but they want to shoot down the drones so quickly. And that's going to segue us right into a social perspective on it. We'll get rid of all that. So this is kind of the police side as a person. As you can imagine, if you were police, in that this would take out the human danger of, say, a hostage situation, or you're looking for a bad guy. And I personally would like that better. Like, if I know there's a bad guy in a house, I don't want to go in that house, because that's scary. Certain SWAT teams already use something that I call a robotic brick, where it's basically just a little RC car that's really strong, and they huck it through a window, and then they drive it around. And they have a camera that feeds right back to their device. And so let's say the bad guy shoots that, whoop-de-doo, the bad guy lost a bullet and lost the element of surprise. And so that increases the safety for the police. And a quote from Mitch Barker, who is from the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. So he kind of has some power when he says this, that the legislator could cripple a promising new crime-fighting technology before it is even tried. Oops, I have to go back. Now bringing in kind of the people defenders in this, we have Shakar Nairan, who is from the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union of Washington. He says, and was a part of the council that shot it down, was that we think that if you have those regulations in place, the public can feel confident that they know what the drones are being used for, and more importantly, they're not being used to personally survey them. And that's the sense of, like, a crooked cop. If you give a crooked cop a baton, he uses the baton and everything's bad. If you give a crooked cop a drone, he's going to do crooked things with it. And that's kind of the fear that's guiding this. And also this quote from Sam Bellamino, who is a privacy activist who was also a part of the council to shoot down this idea. He says that, I think the reason why it touches on the nerve of American citizens is that they are used in war and combat. So now say, well, we want to use these drones here in civilization, and so what are we, in war against citizens? And depending on what you know or how you already feel about drones, that could be the truest statement you have ever heard, ever. And that's kind of what's guiding these people, and it's these checks and balances of people wanting it so much and people not wanting it so much that the perfect even hasn't really been defined yet. And that's why we don't see them being used every day so far. So now, talking about military drones and bringing in all that good stuff about it, but just like there's ups, there's always downs. And a quote from that Airman First Class Brandon Bryant is that drones, that they are too easy a placeholder or avatar for our technological anxieties. And those anxieties could be anything. But when I think about drones flying around autonomously or even operated by a person, is that more or less killing could occur, where it just becomes all too easy to perform strike missions and to order the team to go into the building, and it just becomes all too easy and could get completely out of control. And also a Terminator-like apocalypse, where let's take the person out of it. Let's let the drone just do its job. Has anyone seen the movie Tron? In the movie Tron, in this one scene, this guy basically goes into a video game and he's making the video game from the inside and it's super cool, but he wants a helper because he's making this a massive city and he's just a human-sized human. So he makes a clone of himself and he tells them, I want you to make the perfect system. So he does, and they carry on, and the human discovers these like organic AI thingy-doos in them and that he wants to keep, but the clone sees it as an imperfection and eliminates it, and that's the plot of the story, and I won't spoil anything else for you. But who has more power in this? Let's say that this guy's a drone and we tell him to make the perfect system. What if the drone now sees him as imperfect and you lose utter control of it? So now, going back to domestic one more time. This guy, Trappy, he's a cool guy. He is a part of Team Black Sheep. Essentially, Team Black Sheep started as just a group of guys who like to fly these style drones around, and then they're smart, so they started to make their own equipment, and then they're even smarter and started to sell their own equipment. So they still, fly around, still have fun with their own parts. I consider this guy an expert because he's flown around the skyscrapers of Dubai, Statue of Liberty, French Alps, the Golden Gate Bridge, all iconic places for, say, photography. Now we have this drone with a fancy-dancy camera on it, recording the entire flight, adding completely new angles, a completely new feel about everything you've already known. And that's super cool. He was hired by the University of Virginia Medical to basically fly around the campus, because it's a massive campus, and just record his flight. So he did, and the FFA saw it because the video he posted on YouTube was reported by someone, and he received a $10,000 fine. Now, that's kind of out of control. The fine that he received was $10,000, and he was labeled with being careless and reckless. And with that title comes the fine. And it's also labeled to people, who fly single motor Cherokee engine planes too close to the air traffic control tower while they're landing. There's a slight difference between a university letting this 5-pound piece of styrofoam fly around versus a full-fledged airplane. And that sparked a ton of controversy, lots of documents, and essentially it all ended well. He paid off a smaller fine, the FFA feel like they won, and he felt like he won, and outlining kind of the flaws in the FFA ruling over drones so heavily. Here we go. Okay. So the DRL stands for the Drone Racing League. Essentially, these bad buggers are the Racer 3. It's the newest generation of drones. They can travel upwards of 85 miles per hour. Mine can only go 75. These hold 210 LED lights. The reason for that is when they're traveling 85 miles per hour and they are this big, they have to be seen somehow, so they darken all the rooms, and they have these bright lights flying around, and it creates some very cool artwork. What's the coolest part is that their acceleration rate, they can go from 0 to 80 in 1 second. To get an idea, a Formula 1 car can only go from 0 to 60 in 1.6 seconds. Granted, the car wins over speed, but nevertheless, in acceleration, these guys can really do it. That provides sharper turns, more intense races, and it's overall just crazier in that way. So I'm going to cast this video to the screen. Nice. Yes. Speaker. It's not there.
He was not.
Please. Oh, we're casting to the wrong room now. Yep. Cast it to the wrong room.
Oh, I do that sometimes. It's okay. It happens. Yeah. There we go.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So this is a YouTube video of a race that happens from the perspective of 32 bits of Gil, which is his racer name. Looks so much better with this computer. No offense. See, there's a sharp turn right there. "53 seconds. That's it. Stop cast. Right?
Yeah, you can go back to.
Oh. I've seen that video so many times. Okay, so as you saw in the video, that's the Racer 3 drone down there. The pilots basically sit behind, somewhere off to the side so they're not getting hit by drones, with the goggles that you see in front of you, Fat Shark. That's the company name of the goggles. And they basically just fly them around. And one of the coolest things that just happened recently is that the tryouts just, I think, ended, which basically there's a video game that you download on Steam for complete nothing. And you race in the most realistic DRL simulator that there is because it's produced by DRL. And then if you sign up for the league, then you start racing against other people through this video game. And who's ever the best racer in that video game joins the DRL as an actual pilot. Which I think is very cool. Oh, my bad. One second. So this isn't just all show and lights and prettiness and really, really cool. It has a massive social impact on our today's humanity. Let's say you go back home and you like watching football. So and your favorite team's the Miami Dolphins. So you turn on the football game and you're like, "Hey Joe, did you hear that there was a drone race there?" You're like, "What?" So then you turn back onto the TV, you log into your computer, you find the race, you put it to your TV, and then now you're watching the drone race that just occurred. That happened at the actual Miami Dolphins stadium. And that can hook people of all kinds, even just the location that's being raced at. It doesn't just interest people like me, like techies. One thing that the DRL discovered is that they hooked people who like NASCAR and dirt bike racing because of the speed and the thrills and the dangers of the race. Even though it's not that dangerous, it's very, very dangerous for the drones. So we'll transition to an economic look. And the DRL really kind of honed in on benefiting itself and others through locations and how it works in that department, and also sponsorships. So in location, this is a screenshot right from the video that you saw. The Miami Dolphins football stadium just received multi-million-dollar worth of renovations to it. And what better way to show it off than have a drone race around it? And that gives the stadium bragging rights between its competitors because everything's about show. And it benefits the DRL because now they just had an amazing place to race. They get new viewers because of this, and it also kind of increases the likelihood of someone else being like, hey, why don't you come to our place? And the CEO and founder, Harvard graduate Nicholas Grebouski, states this, that they're getting inbound calls constantly and of people and places who are excited to hear that there will be a drone race coming to their location. And it can happen really anywhere. It can happen in a football-sized stadium. It's happened in an abandoned mall, industrial warehouses that are just left vacant. So it can really happen anywhere, which makes it very, very unique on that regard as well. But also in terms of sponsorships, the company Fat Shark now can advertise super effectively to people like me, as you see in front of you. I was a sucker and I really, really wanted it because that's what the professionals use. And Nicholas says it himself. He says the best way to advertise is by showing off the products firsthand. And this not only shows off what Fat Shark can do and that it's professional grade, it can also show off like the potential in the company, because now the company has even more products coming out, and everyone kind of sees them as the top tier. And for the DRL, they get stuff. They don't have to spend the money making their own equipment. They're just getting it for free. And it's also the latest and greatest available, because Fat Shark's not going to have the professionals racing with something they just have overstocked in the factory. They want them to show off their best and newest thing that they have in front of them. Okay, so on all of that, we'll look at the commercial use of drones themselves, the little quadcopters. So what are some commercial ideas that you have? What could you do if you had any kind of business? What could you use a drone for?
Deliveries?
Deliveries, yes, pizza deliveries.
For the televised cross-country games.
It's happened. Wasn't that at Manchester?
And at
counties?
at NCAA Nationals this year.
Yeah.
I did. So, think
Some of the biggest companies that are dealing with drones are construction, mining, solar, media, like Hollywood, and agricultural companies, because of what drones not only do, but what they can provide. A quote from Ryan Swanken, who is a licensed pilot and photographer for Precision Unmanned Aerial in Fort Lauderdale. He states that before, you'd have to spend thousands of dollars an hour to get an image. Now it's almost painless. Let's say that you're making a skyscraper and you want to kind of have an overview idea of how it's going. Instead of just hearing it from everyone else who has their own opinion on it, send the drone up and fly it around and get an idea for yourself that can be completely unbiased. And a quote from Sam Darkhouse, who is the lead pilot and trainer at the Mitchell Baker Corporation. He states that the drones themselves may not be required for the job sites, but the images they produce will be. Will be. And that's a perfect segue into Skycatch, finally. So Skycatch is a company that has made a drone to use for other companies. It's like a caterer. What they've done is, not only are the drones top tier and incredibly professional, they've honed in on multispectral cameras and sensors along with 3D mapping capabilities. That lets farms or corporations that are building, let's say, a housing group or cul-de-sac, they have a 3D map of that cul-de-sac. And then the cameras provide things such as fuel leak locations and even insufficient nitrogen levels for, say, farms, all done from the drone just flying overhead. And a quote that really kind of outlines commercial use of drones is from Sam Kurt, who is the technology director for the Information Technology and Systems and Office at BP, which is that fuel company we used to get fuel at. He says that it's the data that many companies are after. Drones are just the means of getting it. So a helicopter could do it, but could it get really close to the farms? Could it really circle a skyscraper? Not as well as a drone. So Skycatch, you think it's just a business that's done by a couple people, but they've done work for companies such as Clayco, who is a construction engineering company, DPR, which is also another construction engineering company, Bechtel, which is a construction company, Francis Boyes, who's a businessman in the film industry, Rio Tinto, who's an iron ore company, Chevron, who's an oil industry, and First Solar, who's a semiconductor manufacturing company. That's a lot of engineering and a lot of business, both international and local, of fuel and semiconductors. Oh, my Voc teacher tells us, because he used to work in the semiconductor industry, that it is crazy the technology that they have. And this one company, this one drone company, is helping out all these people, which benefits both through this new technology. Now the FFA has to have some say on this. They can't just let everyone be flying around all over the place. So they have this really lengthy baseline exception to the rules and mandates, and that's called the Section 333 exception. And I've kind of outlined the major points in it. So the Section 333 exception provides operators who wish to pursue a safe and legal entry into NAS, which I think it's really unclear on the FFA website what it is. I believe it's like a LinkedIn for aviation people. That it then provides a competitive advantage in the marketplace. It's also expected that discouraging legal activities and improving safety happens by granting this, and that the activities that this is being used for will result in significant economic benefits, which means it's not just pocket change, and that it's used commercially. Such as Hollywood, if they're filming something and they're right in downtown Portsmouth, right out of Prescott Park, and they're doing things that the FFA, if they knew, would kind of yell at them for. They just pull we have this exception, we've requested an exception from the rules for this amount of time, and everything's good in the end. And that's kind of how the FFA has kind of opened up the business world and also regulating it at the same time. So, when I'm talking about what is really kind of like what we would deal with is the companies that make civilian drones for us to play with. DJI is a Chinese-based corporation that is an 11-year-old. That's the same age as Twitter. So as soon as Twitter came out, so did DJI. What's amazing about them is that they have 60 to 65% of all non-military drones in terms of the market. They own over half of the civilian drone market. And that makes their company valued at over $10 billion in 11 years. And their equipment and everything is spot on. The software that they have, not just the hardware, where the drones can be programmed on your iPad to fly a course, both in altitude and longitude and latitude and everything like that. It's crazy what they can do. And they also don't just do drones, but they deal with photography and camera stabilizers that are used in Hollywood productions as well. And a quote from Clay Dillon is that in a $2.5 billion industry that is growing between 15 and 20% annually, that DJI has got a massive grip over that. So they are raking in the big bones. Then AirDroids, which I think is like the underdog under DJI. They were a Kickstarter. And these are exact images from the Kickstarter. They wanted $35,000. Humble. They just want to be able to start producing their drone, getting it out to people. They received $929,212 out of that Kickstarter. What that meant is that they had to make 1,800 of their little quadcopters that people thought looked cool. That's a lot. And plus they're a company, so they have online sales. Plus online sales, they were making right around $1.2 million in the first couple months of their business really getting going. And the Kickstarter money isn't just like these massive people that are paying $600 to get the full drone kit when it's released. It's people pledging $5 to have their name on the website. They made a ton of money and really were able to get a solid Kickstarter on this. And that kind of shows that anyone who really has an idea or even just like a slight tweak, instead of 4 propellers to make it 3, they can dive into this business headfirst and really come out successful because the market is still so new, even though it's expanding so rapidly. So that's about it. I went over all of this stuff, but really in the end, there is always more. DJI is 11 years old alone, and they have cruddy little Phantom 1s. They're producing Phantom 4s. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year we see a Phantom 5 that's even better than anything they've ever made before. And if you look at everything out there about drones, my presentation alone is probably just the introduction sentence. My comparison. So with that, I want to thank all of you. And in my future citations.
Nice job, Justin. Okay, so we're going to ask you a few questions about your topic. Does anyone have a question read in mind yet? I can go ahead and start.
I have some.
Okay.
So you mentioned that regulation and laws were a tricky thing. Who is it, like a state thing or a federal thing or a local thing? Who makes up the regulations, or is that still unclear?
It's still kind of unclear. I mean, states can have their own personal laws. Like New York would probably be more strict than Maine.
Mm-hmm.
But the FFA is kind of in charge of making the baseline rules,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Federal Aviation Association.
And so you gave us that quote about stuff. So explain to me if the people at Prescott Park who want to go and put their drone up there and see the crowds at Prescott Park, what do they have to do?
So for massive like companies and corporations who really want to use drones constantly, what they do is that they would take classes, they get the right knowledge, like my brother did to receive his license, but this would be much more, and they take a much more lengthier test to receive this. And basically what this does is this gives them permission to request exceptions from the rules. So there's like a curfew on flying drones, for instance, and they can request, hey, can we fly between here and here? And the FFA would respond with yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're so in charge, is because they kind of oversee all that to make sure everyone is kind of taken care of in that
And
sense.
you have to take a class?
I don't think people like us can really take a class because it's more of a commercial purpose, but my brother, for his license, he took a class at UNH, which kind of just gave him background knowledge to then on his own take an online, no, it wasn't online. He went to a testing site, which was at Sanford Airport, that was produced on a certain day. He took it, and if he passed, he received the license.
And the license is granted by the FAA, or by who's in charge of that?
I believe it's by the FFA.
So related to that topic, you spoke a lot about how there needs to be a balance between the new technology and how you can use the technology for good things and people's privacy, and that some people get really concerned about protecting their privacy. Like you had that great example of the British news anchor, I think. So what do you personally think should be that balance between how we use them and privacy?
I don't really have one for that. I think that if I had a house and I'm just doing my daily stuff and a drone like flies and like looking out my window, I feel like I should have the right to physically remove that drone from looking out my window. And then either it could be followed up with bringing it to court and then settled that way, or just you were a bad pilot. You need to run away fast enough.
So are people allowed to fly over your house if they want to?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's really just what property do you own, and do you own the airspace above your house, and then how far?
But it's not clear.
It's not clear, at least from what I found.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the police officers in Seattle, I think was your example, that they were arguing for using the technology, and then there was that like panel or commission that said they shouldn't be able to use it? Which like side do you think you take more?
With the
interest?
police,
Yeah.
definitely.
Why didn't you take that side more?
I spoke with a Sanford officer at a job shadow before I presented a little while back, and I threw this question at him just because he was there, and he said that he would love more tech, just because it takes his life out of it, instead of needing to put it on the line so much. And I think it can be used for bad, but at the same time, if done correctly, you should always have two eyes on every project, like we do at Vogue, and then just have two pilots who keep each other in check, so less chance of a crooked cop kind of working its way into just spying on people.
So Justin, you've just kind of, I'm going to piggyback off of Ms. Barker's question, but you gave a really good example kind of comparing the good versus the evil aspects to the drones. And do you personally see, as I kind of looked at it like, well, drone is kind of a version of technology. It is. It's not kind of like it is. Much like a computer. And if you put a computer into bad hands, that can go very, very bad. And it's kind of the same concept. So do you feel that that kind of relates, or where do you feel that applies?
Yes.
So do you agree? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're worried about like your picture being taken by a drone, how's that any different than someone just like sneaking like a photo with their phone? The phone has much better quality than the drone could as well.
Well, with science, I know that sometimes things happen too fast for them to actually be regulated. Is that kind of what's going on with drones? They're just too much that they don't know.
Yes. Yeah. My brother really kind of expressed a lot of concern in that regard, and how the FFA basically was getting yelled at because they weren't producing quality, manageable regulations fast enough. So they were getting yelled at, like almost threatened by like the government that if they're not producing these, then they're going to be like shut down, or like new management's going to be put in place, because it was limiting the market from expanding. And when that happens in any industry, then it's taken kind of heavily.
I had a question about this expanding market, actually.
Yes.
Since you bring that up. So you talked a lot about how that market is expanding. How easy is it, do you think, to get involved in the market now? So if like you're like a small drone business, how easy would it be to get involved in the market when you have companies like Skycatch or DJI and like AirDroids? I know AirDroids like is smaller than those other two, but how easy is it for like a new company to get into the field?
I think it's very easy. Like for instance, if you just type in racing drone on Amazon, you will have millions of results. And they're just a little different in their own ways, or like they're the same thing that someone copied. But if you have like a new idea, just like with any technology, kind of like a phone, putting a camera on a phone, and then being able to take notes on a phone, and then kind of like, it's like applications in a sense, but it's hardware and software that drones can do. I mean, you could be a company that just makes software compatible with certain drones that then, this one, I could like program it to then be able to hover. This one can't hover right now. It's the most raw control over the drone I've ever seen. I have to keep it in a hover like constantly.
So do you think, sometimes when movies are filmed or documentaries or anything, it'd be easy to detect if a drone is being used? By shadows or something?
Shadows is one way. Also this, I mean, you can debate that it's a helicopter, but a helicopter would be disturbing everyone there, and you don't see the ripples on the water from the massive propellers. And also, if you imagine a surfer, he's probably not flying a helicopter, he wants to be there, so he's just going to send his drone out and get some shots of his buddy. And you could probably, honestly, I've done it. I've scrolled through Instagram and I took a tally of how many times I could detect a drone picture, and I'll always get at least one. Yes?
So you mentioned that the drone cameras kind of are bad. How do people film things like this or take pictures?
With good cameras.
For money, or can you make attachments?
You can install attachments, like for instance this camera that just streams what it sees to the first-person view goggles. That can be swapped out, it can be upgraded, it can be downgraded. Tommy, for example, this is a screenshot right from his Instagram, and even though it's really bad here, if you look him up, the quality of that photo is incredible. It's really just the cameras, and DJI makes very, very good cameras.
I have kind of a closing question. Well, not that I have to be the last question, but clearly you're very, very passionate about this topic. How do you foresee that fitting into your future plans?
It could go anywhere. I'm very interested in robotics, so I think my first plan is to probably enlist in the Coast Guard, and then after doing like all the grunt physical work and getting all the big arms, maybe seeing what drones could be used for in the Coast Guard, and then outside of the Coast Guard post-retirement, teaching, just being like an educator. Like Mr. Wolo teaches robotics class, why couldn't that be a drone class? And also just going into engineering, like for AirDroids, and just being a part of a small company, just making fun drones for people to use.
in the Coast Guard, is there engineering stuff you can do? Like, how does that?
I know that there's like shop people
Uh-huh.
that work on the boats, but I'm pretty sure that they have some kind of engineering of their own,
Mhm.
where they must do some of their stuff in shop.
Yeah.
So I wonder. I still haven't learned about what drones could be in there.
I want to know why drones can accelerate so fast. Like, why can they accelerate faster than?
Let me give you a comparison. So a car battery is what, 12 volts?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure volt is almost like, imagine like the thickness of a stream of water. Volts, I'm pretty sure it's like the thickness of that. This is the battery that this drone operates on. I've charged this for 3 hours. This will fly for 15 minutes. And the voltage on this is rated for 11.1 volts. So it's just going to these little motors that are receiving a ton of electricity, rotating something very light with minimal resistance.
Mm.
It can stop, it can go.
Yeah.
It's
And
really
why
simple.
4? Why do they, like, almost all of them have 4 rotors?
It's just the most stable. So these, it's perfect. I hope someone has this. These two are black and these two are gray.
I wanted to know why they were.
These rotate from your perspective counterclockwise, and these rotate from your perspective clockwise. If all these rotated clockwise, the drone would literally, because of the momentum and the propellers, be
do it
going
all.
slower.
Yeah.
But since it's like this cross pattern, they fight each other.
Uh-huh.
So
So they counteract.
yeah, so a tricopter could be a little more, or
Yeah.
a little less stable than a quadcopter. And there's also like octocopters.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm on like
and things
6
like
or
that.
8 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Does just having more propellers make it like more heavy and harder to like navigate like those fast turns? Like when you showed us the video, there were a lot of really sharp turns. Does having like the 4 help it balance and take on those turns better?
I think so. I think it. I think when you go with more, you go with more weight and more bulk.
Mm-hmm.
And if you imagine like picking up something really heavy, you go really slow versus picking up something light that you can just
Mm-hmm.
accelerate rapidly.
Awesome. Do you want to show us how this works? Don't chop it up. Those things are sharp.
For sure.
Sharp.
So they sent me this little Velcro strip that keeps this battery mounted to it, which I think is a little minimal.
Oh, so you don't shred the cord? So you don't shred the cord?
Oh yeah, I've broken this cord before. Don't tell Grandma. And what I really like about this too is that it's so stupid, it's so much fun. Where, oh my gosh, I did that. Essentially, I could put this battery like strapped to the back, and I could just play with the controller a little bit and calibrate it so that it's perfectly balanced. So the drone racing, I'm so sorry guys, I can't get this right. The drone racers, they have right on the front of the drone, they have mounted GoPro cameras. So I can mount a GoPro camera to this as well, but it's going to throw off the balance. So through the controller, just sending like, hey, adjust a little more this way, it can do that. And I shove this wire right into the camera's wires. I won't do the goggles, but essentially there's a little antenna that attaches to here, and that sends the signal from the camera right to the goggles. And what's cool about these is that they're so close to your eyes, they take the picture and they distort it, and then since it brings it so close to your eyes, what I actually see in my perspective is like a movie theater screen size of what the drone sees. So,
Oh, we have to see one of those.
papers. That's basically it. Again, it can. I played around with it once, and I just like. I wonder what happens if I just push the throttle forward, and the drone went from level to it looked like it was falling, And it just kept getting flatter and flatter.
Awesome. Alright, well, we are well over time for the question period. Do you have any last questions that we want to ask? Okay. Thank you so much for the
Thank you.
Q&A, Justin. If you could just take a few minutes out in the pod, and you go out there with me.
You don't need to breathe.
Yeah, so, I can get you the
Oh, no.
I explained.